I've always been proud of the fact that nothing in my life was a surprise. Not in the fun way, anyway. I'm the kind of man who sets up automatic transfers, check statements twice a month, keeps a small emergency fund in a separate bank, and knows the exact date our mortgage rate resets. My wife calls it my inner accountant. I call it staying ahead of disaster. When people talk about inheritances, they usually mean some vague windfall from a relative they barely knew. That was never going to be me. My parents weren't wealthy. My father worked maintenance in a school district. My mother did receptionist work until her joints gave out. They were careful, not comfortable. When my dad died, there was no mystery. There was a funeral, a modest life insurance policy, and a file folder of paperwork my mom had labeled in her tidy, looming handwriting. So when the bank called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said, "Mr. Reynolds, we need to speak with you about an account you're the heir to," my first reaction wasn't excitement. It was suspicion. The caller sounded polished, but not scripted. She used my full name and verified my address. She asked me to confirm the last four digits of my social security number, which I refused to do on the phone. I told her I'd call back through the bank's main line. She didn't argue. "That's reasonable," she said, and gave me an extension. When I called the main number, waited on hold, and got routed back to her, she sounded the same. That detail mattered because it made it real. Scams fall apart under basic friction. "I'm calling from the Trust Services Department," she said. "We have an account that has been inactive, but it has a named beneficiary. You are listed as the primary heir." "Heir?" I repeated, because the word sounded too old-fashioned for my life. She gave me an account number, partial. She gave me a branch location in a town 2 hours away, one I'd passed on road trips but never stopped in. She said the account belonged to a man named Harold Klein. I didn't recognize the name. She paused as if expecting that. "The account holder passed away," she said. "We received notice through an estate filing. We are required to contact the beneficiary." I wrote everything down in my notebook, the same notebook I use for appliance serial numbers and insurance dates. The act of writing calmed me. "How much is in the account?" I asked. "I can't disclose balances over the phone," she said. "But it is significant." That word, significant, hit me in the chest in a way I didn't expect. I told my wife, Dana, that evening. We were in the kitchen, our daughter upstairs doing homework, the dishwasher humming in the background like a polite witness. Dana listened with her arms crossed. "This sounds like a scam," she said. "I thought so too," I said, "but I verified the number. It's the bank. They know my information." Dana's face tightened. "Who is Harold Klein?" "I don't know. Do you have an uncle you've never mentioned?" she asked, half joking, but her eyes stayed sharp. I didn't. My family tree is small and mostly sad. My father was an only child. My mother had one sister who moved away and didn't keep in touch. There were no secret branches that could hold a man named Harold. Dana said, "Maybe your dad had a friend who left you something." That seemed plausible for about 10 seconds. Then a different thought surfaced, quiet and uncomfortable. Maybe my dad had a life I didn't know about. I didn't like that thought. I pushed it away and focused on what I could control. Paperwork, verification, facts. The next morning, I took a personal day and drove to the branch. The bank building was plain, are some steps: verification, identification, tax forms. But yes, you are the named beneficiary. I left the bank in a daze and sat in my car with the folder on the passenger seat like it was a living thing. The first major twist wasn't that I was inheriting money. It was that someone I didn't know had arranged for me to receive more money than my entire life had ever held at once. And it meant I had been seen, watched, chosen, for reasons I couldn't yet understand. Dana reacted the way practical people react to irrational fortune. She tried to turn it into a plan. "We pay off the mortgage," she said that night, her voice tight with restrained excitement. "We fix the roof. We fund college. We finally breathe." I nodded because that's what I should have wanted. The relief was real. I felt it in my shoulders, like someone had loosened a strap I'd worn for years. But underneath relief was suspicion that had teeth now. $1 million doesn't arrive without a story. Money like that is never just money. It's history, it's choices, it's secrets. I asked Dana, "Should we tell anyone?" She shook her head immediately. "Not yet. Not until it's in our account. Not until we know what it is." She was right. It was also a moment that revealed something about us. How quickly we turned into people who wanted to hide money, as if money were a crime. I didn't tell my mother at first. That's something I regret, but not because it was kind to keep her out of it. I kept it from her because I was afraid she would know something I didn't. I started researching Harold Klein online. The name pulled up an obituary in a small-town newspaper. He'd been 78, retired, no children listed, predeceased by spouse, survived by a sister in another state. There was no mention of me, no clue why my name would be on his bank forms. I printed the obituary and stared at the face in the small photo. Gray hair, polite smile, eyes that didn't give anything away. He looked like a man you wouldn't notice in a grocery store, which made it worse. The second twist arrived in the mail a week later. A letter addressed to me in neat handwriting, sent from a law office. Inside was a single page, typed with a signature at the bottom. It was from Harold Klein's estate attorney. The letter said, in plain language, that Harold had left me the bank account intentionally. It also said Harold had left a separate sealed document with instructions that I was strongly encouraged to read before accessing the funds. The attorney asked me to come in person to receive it. Dana read the letter twice and said, "This is turning into a movie. It's turning into a problem," I said. We drove to the attorney's office the following day. It was in an older building with narrow stairs and a waiting room that smelled like old paper. The attorney, Mr. Phelps, was kind but firm. He treated me like someone who'd walked into a situation he didn't understand, which was accurate. He handed me a sealed envelope, thick, heavy. "This was left in our custody," he said. "Mr. Klein was explicit that you should read it before you make any decisions. I cannot compel you, but I strongly advise you to follow his wishes." Dana and I opened it in the car. The paper inside was folded carefully, like someone had practiced. It was a letter from Harold Klein. He wrote in a steady, restrained voice. He apologized for the shock. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, only acknowledgement. Then he wrote the line that turned my stomach to ice. "I am your father." My first reaction wasn't grief or anger. It was disbelief so complete it felt like my brain refusing to load the file. Dana stared at the letter, then at me. "That's not possible," she said, but her voice wasn't confident. I read the line again. I read the next paragraphs. Harold said he had an affair with my mother when she was young. He said she chose to raise me with the man I knew as my father, and Harold agreed to stay away. He wrote that he'd watched from a distance, sending money quietly through channels to ensure I had stability without disrupting my life. Then he wrote something that made me feel sick in a different way. "The maintenance job your father held was arranged through a friend. The union membership, the pension. I helped, not because I deserved credit, but because you deserved security." Every memory I had of my parents struggling shifted slightly, like a photograph being tilted. The hard years, the careful budgeting, the way my mother always insisted we could manage. Had we managed because of them, or because someone else was quietly cushioning the fall? was, she said firmly. He raised you. He loved you. Harold contributed money. That's not fatherhood. I wanted to argue. I wanted to insist money mattered because money had shaped everything in my life. My mother had just confirmed what Harold wrote. He'd been sending money, arranging jobs, pushing stability into our lives like a hidden hand. You let him pay for us, I said. My mother's eyes hardened. Your father would have taken that job anyway, she said. Harold made a call. That's it. And yes, I accepted help. Because you were a child and you needed shoes and doctors and a roof that didn't leak. There it was, the moral nod. She'd done what she had to do. I could see that. I could also see the betrayal in it. The way she'd let another man's money flow into our life while keeping the truth sealed. Then she said the line that recontextualized my father's pride in a way that made my throat tighten. Your father never knew. Harold insisted. I agreed. Your father deserved dignity. So my mother had lied to protect my father's sense of worth. And she'd lied to me to protect my idea of our story. And she'd taken money from a man she'd once loved or used because survival demanded it. The third twist wasn't that Harold was my biological father. It was that money had been quietly steering my life for decades while I told myself I was steering it. For a few weeks, there was a strange calm. Dana and I agreed not to make any sudden decisions. The bank process continued. The attorney handled documentation. I attended meetings, signed forms, answered questions like a man doing taxes. This was the false resolution. On paper, it looked like it would end neatly. Money transferred, life improved, secret digested. I even started to imagine paying off the mortgage. I started to picture my daughter's college fund fully funded. I started to feel the old tightness in my chesties. Then the fourth twist arrived. A certified letter from another attorney, representing Harold's sister. She was contesting the transfer. Not because the beneficiary designation was invalid, it was legally solid, but because she claimed Harold had been manipulated in his final years. She claimed he'd been mentally compromised. She demanded financial records, medical records, communications. She wanted to drag the story into court, into depositions, into public filings. Dana read the letter and said, "She wants a piece. She wants control." I said, but my voice was tight. Court meant time. Court meant legal fees. Court meant our family secret becoming public record. Court meant my mother being questioned. My dead father's dignity being dragged through paperwork he never consented to. And court meant something else. It meant my $1 million relief could evaporate into attorney bills while we stood on the sidelines, powerless. I called Mr. Phelps. He sighed like a man who'd seen this before. "It's not uncommon," he said. "Money makes people brave." That sentence haunted me because it was true about me too. The legal process began slowly, then suddenly. Motions, requests, deadlines. My mother was subpoenaed for deposition. So was Dana, because of marital assets and anticipated inheritance planning. Even my employer received a verification request because my identity and address history mattered. At home, the secret started leaking into everything. Dana and I argued about strategy. She wanted to fight. She wanted to keep the money because it would secure our daughter's future. I wanted to settle quietly because I wanted the secret to stay contained. That difference revealed something about us. Dana saw the money as opportunity. I saw it as contamination. One night Dana said, "This is real life, not a morality play. If we don't defend it, we lose it. And if we defend it, we blow up my mother's life." I said. Dana's eyes flashed. "Your mother chose this," she said. "She took his money for decades. Now she wants you to be noble at the expense of our family." That hurt because it touched something I didn't want to admit. I was angry at my mother, but I was also using her as a reason to avoid conflict, to avoid the risk that comes with fighting for something big. I told myself I was being principled. The truth was I was afraid. I didn't want to sit in a courtroom and watch strangers parse my family's private failures. I also didn't want to confront the uncomfortable thought that maybe I didn't deserve the money either. My mother's deposition was the first time I saw her truly calm. She sat in a small conference room with a court reporter, 2 attorneys, and a stack of documents. mouth tightened. "You're buying silence," she said. "There's a difference." She was right, and I still pushed for the settlement because I couldn't bear the idea of this dragging on. My mother begged me to settle too, voice small and tired. "Please," she said, "I can't do more of this." So we settled. The money transferred. The account closed. A large number appeared in our bank, still life-changing, even after the cut. Dana paid off the mortgage within a week, almost spitefully, like she needed to turn the money into something solid before it vanished again. I thought that was the end. I thought we'd contained it. That was the false resolution in its purest form. Money in the account, paperwork signed, story finished. Then my mother was hospitalized. Not from anything dramatic, just a fall, broken hip, a complication that turned into a longer stay. The bills started arriving quickly, and Medicare covered a lot, but not everything. Rehab costs, home modifications, a pile of small expenses that added up like termites. Dana said, "We can cover it." I nodded. I should have felt grateful we could. Instead, I felt a bitter irony. The same secret money that had once helped us now would help my mother in her decline. But when I went through my mother's paperwork to help manage bills, I found a folder I'd never seen. It wasn't labeled neatly like the others. It was shoved behind the file cabinet, thick with old documents. Inside were letters, not from Harold, from my father. Letters he'd written to my mother years ago, some angry, some pleading, some resigned. And in several of them, he mentioned the money. "You think I don't know," one letter said. "You think I can't do math. I see the deposits. I see what's changing. I'm not stupid." My hands went numb as I read. My mother had told me my father never knew. She'd sworn it. She'd framed it as dignity. He knew. He'd known and stayed anyway. He'd watched another man's money enter his home and still put on his uniform and went to work every day. He'd raised me with that knowledge sitting in his chest like a stone. My throat tightened so hard I had to sit down on the floor. This was the fifth twist, and it recontextualized everything. My father's pride wasn't untouched. It had been tested daily, and he had carried it in silence. He hadn't been protected. He'd been sacrificed for the story my mother wanted to keep intact. I confronted my mother in her hospital room. She was pale, hair thin against the pillow, looking smaller than I was prepared for. "Dad knew," I said, holding up one of the letters. Her eyes flicked to it, then away. For a moment she looked like she might deny it. Then her face collapsed slightly, like she'd run out of energy for lies. "Yes," she whispered. "Why did you tell me he didn't?" I asked, and my voice cracked in a way I hated. My mother swallowed. "Because if you knew he knew," she said slowly, "you would see what it cost him, and you would hate me." "I don't know what I feel," I said. She stared at the ceiling and said, "Harold wanted to step in more than once. Your father threatened to leave if he did. Your father said, 'If he ever meets the boy, I'm gone.' So Harold stayed away. That was the deal. A deal. Like custody of my life had been negotiated in private while I played Little League and worried about grades. And Dad stayed? I asked. My mother's eyes filled. "He stayed," she said, "because he loved you, and because he didn't want you to grow up thinking you were bought." I felt anger rise finally, hot and sharp. "But I was," I said, "in pieces. I just didn't know." My mother flinched. "You were loved," she said. "Don't do that." I wanted to and there isn't a way to spend either of them without feeling the weight of what they cost.